honored to come and speak on behalf of the county today to talk about maybe what's happening in our county, but also provide you with some ways that you might be able to connect, and also to just introduce you to a resource. If this is something that you've been thinking about, this is the person to talk to. And she'll be available to us today to answer questions. So I will step aside and let you share what is on your heart this morning. Yeah? Uh-oh.
All right, are we there now? Okay. So the first thing you can see about me is I'm super awkward with all of these microphones and stuff. So hello, I'll just say first, thank you so much to your congregation, to the Webb family, for inviting me to speak today. I really appreciate that. I come to you as a mom, and we all know that that brings a lot of things. My children are adults now, and I'm still parenting them. You guys know how that goes. Even though they're branching out on their own, I am also a dog mom. And so for those of you guys that have pets, then you know I have a perpetual toddler in my house who is very routine oriented and reminds me that I have missed walking time frequently. I am also a grandma, which is a particular joy that I love to spend time with the kids. And right now that means we chase them at ball games a lot. We have 3 girls on 3 different ball teams frequently, and more coming our way. I've also worked at the agency for 31 years. So long time. It's really, thanks. Sometimes it's a good thing. Sometimes I want to hit my head off a wall. But as we get going, we'll talk a little bit about what's kept me there for those 31 years. And one of my coworkers, Caitlin, is also going to join me a little bit later. So when you guys are downstairs, she's going to be coming on in. So I thought I would start today with a little bit of history and a thank you to a friendly church visitor. And this friendly church visitor found a little girl who had been beaten and chained in a room. And that was in 1875. So when this church visitor called the local police and said, "What do we do?" they were told there were no laws to protect children, nothing they could do. And so this family was not going to just let this child suffer in this way, and so they continued to reach out to places. How do we help? How do we help? What do we do? And they finally were able to help her through the New York Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. So this society that was meant to protect dogs, horses, to protect animals, was actually used to step in and protect this child whose name was Mary Ellen. And so because of them, this abuser was put into jail and Mary Ellen was moved to a safe family. And that was the beginning of it. Other societies for the protection of animals started adding services for children into what they did, and then we got a clue and actually made laws that were specifically to protect children. In this area, we're also kind of trend setters. Washington County Department of Job and Family Services actually started as the children's home in 1867. And you guys might have heard the name Catherine Fay Ewing around this area. She was the founder of our first children's home. We still have Ewing School. And that was the first ever home of its type across the United States. We're continuing that on. The children's home was open for about 109 years, and they closed down as foster homes were becoming more popular. And so in today's world, our agency works with children from newborns straight out of the hospital at points. We are working with children that are 18 and even sometimes up to 21 years of age. So we're crossing a very big gamut there. Children can choose to stay with us after they turn 18 until they graduate from high school. And then we also have services that we can offer to them once they get out of school. So they're not just set out on their own when they turn 18. There's still help that they can have. So I think most of you would agree that our kids are adults at 18, but maybe not truly quite ready to take care of everything that they need to take care of at that time. Um, and there's also another program called Bridges that can help our children when they emancipate from care. But I'm going to go back for a little bit, if you guys don't mind, and talk about those friendly church visitors and talk a little bit about love. You threw those hearts out. I should have grabbed a few too. So that family certainly reached out in love to help a little girl that they did not know. This love thing kind of seems to be a reoccurring thing in our Bibles. Maybe you guys have noticed that before. In Mark 12:28 and 29, it says this: one of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, "Of all of the commandments, what is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and all your strength. And the second is this: love your neighbors as yourself. There's no commandment greater than these." So obviously, we're instructed to love our neighbors, to care for them. And the children that are involved with our agency and their birth parents are indeed our neighbors. Perhaps they're not the neighbors that we are typically wanting to think about. Many of the families that we work with are dealing with addictions. They're dealing with some mental health illnesses. Some of these families have had issues for generations. Some of the families have their own developmental disabilities that make it difficult for them to understand what their children are truly needing. And these people are also made in God's image. And that's the part that I think has kept me at our agency for 31 years. I am able to look at these people and see a promise of hope. If they knew what we knew, if they could lock into the reality that what's missing in their lives is not going to be solved by drugs or alcohol or another relationship, but what it could be solved by is relationship with a Savior that is waiting for them. He's waiting for them to respond. That holds me working with our families and working with our kids. This idea of neighbors caring for each other, of a child being able to remain in their own community, to be in their own school, to be with their friends, to have the same service providers, it's incredibly important. And yet often, as the person who's seeking placement, I simply don't have enough local families that I can do that. The agency has more foster kids in care today than we have ever had before. We have about 92 children that we are taking care of right now. And we have 18 foster homes locally. We have 3 additional foster homes that do emergency and respite placements for us. And 3 of those 18 homes are actually in the middle of an adoption process. And what tends to happen to some of our families is that we fill up all of their bedrooms. And then they retire, if you will, because you can only build on so much. So of those homes, I was going to say we have 31 children. Of our 92, 31 of our children are here locally in our own communities because of our shortage of homes. 5 of our homes will accept teenagers. So that means by virtue of being over 12, you may be sent out of our community. If it is a larger sibling group, you might be sent out of our community so that we can keep you together as a set of siblings. Sometimes mild medical issues have to be sent out of our community because we don't have a local provider that can meet that need. We simply need more people that are willing to open up their hearts and serve their community in a way that seems very hard. And it's very strange to most people to allow a child to come live with you and love them like your own, knowing that you have to give them back. That makes me think a lot about how I serve. And we were talking about service out front because you guys are getting ready, a few of you, to take a trip, and that's amazing. So I we'll pray for you on that journey and wish the best for you. I think about how many times I could have served. I've gone on a few of those mission trips, and there's some days where I'm just like, enough. Enough, I need to rest. I think about how I've served and opportunities that perhaps I've missed because I was tired, I was busy, sometimes because I'm a little shy, although I'm standing up here with a microphone. Sometimes service looks hard. It just looks really hard. And I wonder if I'm truly looking around and prayerfully trying to see the good works that have been prepared for me to do. Ephesians 2:10 tells us that we are God's handiwork, created in Jesus Christ to do good works, which God has prepared in advance for us to do. And that gets me every time. I am always just amazed that God looked down and saw Tammy and said, this job, this is yours. And I frequently pause and just go, excuse me, God, I think we need to talk. I'm feeling like maybe you've given me about half of the talents that I think are needed for this particular job. So we need to chat. And that's when God steps in. That's when he steps in to let me know this is not about my talent. He is the one who prepares us for the task. My job is to trust, and he will take care of everything else. So as I think about that, I think that we serve, we show others God, we see his handiwork working, we actually get to become his handiwork, and then we in turn grow closer to God, which I think is just an amazing cycle that can show our gentleness, our kindness, our benevolence, and our trust in God. So today, I don't know where you guys' hearts are, where God is calling you to serve. That may not be to be a foster and adoptive parent, and that's okay. Maybe your place is somewhere else, and that is going to be great as well. But perhaps the next time that you hear somebody say, I'm thinking about being a foster parent, instead of saying, oh my gosh, no, I could never do that. No. Love them and give them back to someone else. Maybe instead you could say, you would be an amazing foster parent. I know someone you can call, and you can share our information. Maybe there's something small you can do that supports a foster family or one of our foster children. Sometimes we have people give us donations of things like diapers and wipes, lice kits. We use those occasionally. Maybe a gift card for a pizza or some chicken nuggets as people are accepting placements. We have a local foster family foundation that accepts donations. They help us pay for what we call our extras for our children. They are involved in helping us get sporting supplies and maybe dance costumes, all of the things that kids need that sometimes if you have your own children and then foster children, you're signing 5 people up for ball at the same time. That gets a little expensive. One of our granddaughters got a $400 baseball bat, softball bat last year, and I was like, what? So it helps pay for things like that. When our teens emancipate, we furnish them in their apartments. We help them set up their kitchens. So sometimes we accept donations of favorite kitchen supplies, maybe a recipe to go with that, that our child would be able to make. And if you have ever thought about foster care or know someone that is, then now is the time. Our kids very much need you. They need to be here, not sent off to, we have a lot of children in Dayton, Cincinnati, Columbus, Toledo. Our children need you here. So with that, I will just say thank you for letting me talk to you today. And like I said, my coworker Caitlin and I will be joining you. So if you guys have any questions, if there's anything you'd like to know more about, we'll be available while you guys are having Friendsgiving. Thank you.
Tammy, thank you so much for sharing with us this morning. We appreciate having you here. Welcome. We're so glad to have you. So feel free to sit back down. And when I invited the county to come out, I'll be honest, I had very little expectation that someone that loves God was going to come and share Scripture with us. And she emailed me this week, and she's like, is it okay if I share Scripture? I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, absolutely. But I already prepared a 45-minute sermon to go with it, so sorry. You're going to have to listen to 2 today. No, but as I'm preparing for today, it was such a weird thing in my brain. So as a pastor, there's this pressure to celebrate Veterans Day as well, right? Because we don't want to forget Veterans Day when we celebrate and we honor those who have served our country so faithfully. In fact, if you've served in the armed forces, would you stand for us today so that we could give you a little bit of a round of applause this morning? Yeah, thank you so much for your service. Thank all of you so much for all the sacrifice you made. But if we're being honest, I think we'd rather not celebrate Veterans Day, right? Not because we don't like our veterans, because we'd rather not have war. We'd rather not have to send our young men and women to other countries to fight with weapons against one another. But it's a reality in the world that we live in. And it's the same thing with Orphan Sunday. As I'm preparing for this, I'm like, I wish we didn't have to talk about it. I wish this was not a problem in our world. In fact, I think our world feels the same way. Just as Tammy shared, Child Protective Services was born out of Animal Protective Services because humans said, you should take care of your kids, right? We didn't want to have to think about this idea of people not either being able to take care of their children for various reasons, the idea that parents pass away, that life can happen, and parents can have horrible accidents that leave their children without someone there. But we assumed that we would have to take care more of animals than we would of children. But the unfortunate reality came true that we needed to take care of our children as well. If you've served in taking care of children either as a foster parent, as an adoptive parent, if you've supported a foster family, if you've been connected to this system in any way, would you stand for us as well this morning? I know we have some foster parents right down here, people involved over there. Dee Dee and her family, they've been involved in foster care. Thank you. Can we give them a round of applause as well? Thank you all so much. You could be seated as well. Again, we're so thankful for the ways that you've served, but I really wish we didn't have to do it. But God calls us very clearly to take care of our children, to take care of our widows, to take care of the vulnerable margins of our society. And I do specify our society as well. See, when we hear the term orphan, I think we conjure up these images of movies from far-off places, the kids in Africa, the kids in Asia, the far-off countries or in Europe where they're having wars. That's where orphans are, right? But we have so many kids in our town, in our county, in our state that are desperately in need of people to stand up for them, to stand in the gap for them, and to be the church that we're called to be, to love, to protect, and show the stability that God designed the family to be. Today, as I prepared for this, I read through James chapter 1, verse 27, which says, "Religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this, to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world." That is a powerful charge. To have religion or faith that is considered pure and faultless, we must take care of the orphans and widows and ourselves. That is what God is calling us to do. It's not just a suggestion or a good idea. It is a charge. It is a challenge. It is a mission handed down to the church. So I just want to kind of quickly explore this whole topic. I want to look at, one, the urgent need for us to get involved. If we want to put numbers to reality, the Ohio Department of Job and Family Services tells us there are over 16,000 children in our state alone that are in the foster care system in some way, at some level, at some age. 16,000. In Washington County, as we heard earlier, there are 92 children in foster care and only 18 homes. And those 18 get narrowed down pretty quickly, as we heard. So we are having to send children from their comfort, from their community. We're having to send them into new worlds to find families to care for them. What if we stood up and we said, we want to keep these kids here and we want to provide the stability here. We want to make it so that their visitations with their parents don't have to be a 3-hour road trip, but rather a 20-minute trip down to the office to visit with their parents. Nationally, the numbers are even more staggering. There are over 400,000 kids in foster care in the United States of America. And sadly, over 120,000 of them are waiting to be adopted into a permanent family. Now, why do I specify that number? I specify that because the idea of foster care is reunification. So what we do is we build these family units around these kids, but not just around the kids, we build it around their entire family. So if mom and dad are dealing with addiction, the county is working with them, the foster parents have the opportunity to be an encouragement to them, and the idea is that we want these kids to be reunified with their parents. And we want to rebuild that family unit and encourage them and lift them up. But sometimes that can't be the answer. Whether it is because the children's parents have passed away, they have, for whatever reason, failed to make the progress necessary to take their children back into their home. Whatever the reason is, there are over 120,000 children who are not waiting to be sent back to their mom and dad. They are now waiting to be put into permanent homes outside of their biological families. And for many children, this absence of family leads to a lifetime of changes, including struggles with their identity, their trust, and their stability. Many of you know that I mentor at the Hope Center, and I work with these men that are in recovery. So far, I've walked this journey with 6 men, and all but one of them has been a product of foster care where they never were permanently placed in a home. Some of them, in the 10 to 12 years that they were in foster care, were in 15 to 20 different homes for various reasons, and we don't know those reasons. But we do know that not having stability, not having consistency, leads to a tumultuous future. And as the church, I think we should try and stand in that gap. And unfortunately, I am going to mention one of the darkest realities that face the children in these vulnerable sectors of our society, and that is those that are at highest risk for trafficking. Ohio, unfortunately, ranks as one of the top 5 states for incidents of human trafficking. Did you know that? Children are frequently the victims of these situations. It's estimated that over 293,000 children in the United States are at risk of being trafficked, with the average age of victims being just 12 to 14 years old. These children are exploited, they're isolated, and they often feel as if there's nowhere to turn. Many times they're hooked on drugs just to keep them complacent. The reality, church, is that this should bring us to our knees. It should stir something deep within us. Children, the ones that we are called to look after, are facing battles that no child should ever have to face. As followers of Christ, we are not only called to see these children suffering, but to do something about it. God's heart is for the orphan. The call to care for orphans is not just a nice idea, it's a deeply rooted thing in God's character. Psalm chapter 68 verses 5 and 6 reads this: God in his holy dwelling is a father to the fatherless and a champion of widows. God provides home for those who are deserted. He leads out of the prisoners to prosperity, and the rebellious live in a scorched land. Now, when I read this in the NIV, it really threw me off because it said, God sets the lonely in families, And I read that weirdly. I'm like, why does he make families lonely? That doesn't make any sense. And then as I reread and I looked at other versions, I realized it's not that he makes families lonely. He takes the lonely people and he places them in families. God's heart is for the orphan and is for the widow. He identifies himself as a father to the fatherless and as one that will provide homes for those who are deserted, the ones that are abandoned, the ones that are told they're worthless, that they're unwanted, and he gives them a community to be in, to thrive, a family to love on them. How do you think he goes about that, church? Could it be by using this institution that he built? Could it be by using a system of foster homes that are loved and supported and infiltrated by the love of Christ? Maybe. His heart is full of compassion, full of protection, and full of unfailing love for these children. Throughout Scripture, we see that God cares deeply for all vulnerable people. In Deuteronomy 10:18, he says, "Defend the cause of the fatherless and the widow, and loves the foreigner residing among you, giving them food and clothing." Over and over and over, God commands his people to reflect his love. To the Israelites, he said, "Do not take advantage of the widow or the fatherless." Exodus 22:22. God's laws were designed to ensure that orphans were protected, that they were supported, and that they were given dignity. And the New Testament isn't any different. Jesus, during his ministry, welcomed children and he blessed them. When others thought that they were just insignificant distractions, sorry, my brain got distracted for a minute. In Mark 10:14, he famously said, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these." Jesus took time for the children because he saw their value and he loved them deeply. Today, as his church, we are called into that same mission. We are called into that same vision to work and follow that example, to see children as Jesus sees them, with a heart of love and a willingness to sacrifice to make sure that they have what they need. So, how can the church respond? How can we embrace this mission and step into this area of ministry? What does it look like for us to respond to the call? Here are some potentially practical ways that we can step into this ministry. One is that we can support foster families and foster care initiatives. Many of us may not be able to actually foster children in our homes, but there are countless ways to support those who do. Tammy shared several of organizations and ways that we could donate supplies, that we can invest in the children. We could potentially provide meals to the families, help with chores or work around their homes, offer to become background checked and offer child care to some of these families. We can go a long way in supporting these foster families, which, by the way, do you know, church, that you will be supporting a foster family? We live in the church's house, and we hope to fill it with kids. In fact, I'm already planning an expansion. No, I'm just kidding. But this church is going to be involved in foster care whether you like it or not, because it's something that God has laid on Kendra and I's hearts since the day we got married. And it's been a vision that we have followed along this very long and awkward and frustrating path for many years now. But we've realized that it was to be in a time such as this. We weren't meant to be foster parents in Columbus because God had called us to Belpre, Ohio. And so we now see clearly that God waited to fulfill this dream of ours until his timing made sense. And as we are nearing the end of the process of preparing and licensing, and hopefully we pass, I don't know, we'll see. We'll see soon. We're excited to welcome children into our home, but we're even more excited to welcome them into this family. into a place where people like you are going to care for them and love them, encourage them, and walk alongside of them as they are going through what can only be described as the darkest time in their life. So we can support foster families. Maybe you could become a mentor to at-risk youth. I'm sure if I make a call to the principal of the elementary or the middle or the high school and say, I've got a church full of people ready to mentor and tutor and speak into the young lives of your school, they would have a list of names a mile long ready to go. We can support those with mentoring and coaching and just offering a listening ear to these young people that have a voice that needs to be heard. They have a story that they're excited to tell. We need to show these young people that they matter and that they're valued and that we love them. And some of these children I'm talking about are living in their primary biological family right now. But they still need encouraged. They still need love. They still need supported. Another thing that we can do, and Tommy and I talk about this one a lot, is we can advocate for legislation and community awareness. We are still in the process of building an efficient, effective system to care for these kids. It has come a long way since being run by the Animal Care Society, but there's still growth to be had. So getting involved in the community, understanding the legislation process, and going out and encouraging people to vote for things that, I'm not getting into politics actually, we're going to pass that for a minute, but getting involved and just making people aware of a need, of a desire, and as Tammy said, encouraging someone. If they say, I want to be a foster, I'm thinking about being a foster parent, say, absolutely, let's sign you up before you change your mind. We can support different organizations around us. We house one in our building. The Boys and Girls Club is an organization that reaches out and takes care of young people. And we have housed that as, I consider it a ministry. They don't, but I call it a ministry in our building. We can advocate for things like this. You can give your time in prayer, and you can give your resources in financial support. I pray that you will commit to praying for these children, their families, and these organizations that support them in the coming weeks, months, and years. That you will add it to your daily prayer list, to not even by name, but just by idea, pray for people who are caring for children, pray for these children in the system, and pray for the system. But there's also, for some of us, we have the ability to give financially and to support these organizations that we trust in the process of working with children. If that's something that you would like to invest in, let me know, and I will connect you with those organizations. We would love to take resources as well, but time and talent are two things that we don't give quite enough of. So as we wrap up today, I want you to reflect deeply on this heart of God. What we're talking about is the heart of God, a heart that beats with sacrificial love for all of humanity. We don't deserve the grace that we get, yet he gives it freely. God calls us to love like he loves, to give like he gives, even when it's hard. This kind of love, a love that gives even when it hurts, it's not just a pleasant idea or a comfortable philosophy. It's a life-altering, soul-changing reality that demands nothing less than everything we have to give. Choosing to embrace this heart of sacrificial love will lead us to places we'd rather not go. It may cost us our comfort, our convenience, our favorite pillow, our favorite blanket. It may take your control in situations. And let's be honest, it will be painful at times. But in the end, that love, God's love, is always worth it. It is a love that breaks through our selfishness, that heals our wounds and transforms the world. So my prayer for you is this: don't shrink away from the cost. Don't settle for a version of God's love that never asked for you to sacrifice. Instead, step into the fullness of God's heart even when it hurts. And trust that he will meet you there with grace and strength. Because while the journey is hard, it is a journey that leads to abundant life, both for you and the ones you love. It's a big calling. And I was talking with Tammy earlier, and it's something I've said a lot, but there's always a reason not to do something. There's always a reason not to. When our trip got transferred from North Carolina to Florida, I said, I don't want to drive that long. I almost bowed out because I'm like, I don't want to be in a car for 14, 16 hours. There's always a reason not to do it. Always. But God calls us to look past the reasons not to do it and to see the reason that he's telling us to do it. So whatever God is stirring in your heart this morning, I pray that you don't let it just fall away, drift away. Embrace whatever he's doing in your heart and invest it in the future of the kingdom. Love like God loves.